Thank you for joining us at Career Conversations. Today, we will be hearing from Brandon Biggs, CEO of XR Navigation. Thank you, Brandon, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Great. So, can you start off by telling our participants a little bit about your visual impairment as well as your academic and your employment history?
That's a lot. All right. So my visual impairment is Leber's congenital amaurosis. I have the CRB1 variant. And uh, so I was born blind, and I was born with a little bit more vision than I have now. So it is progressive. But I was basically raised to be a totally blind individual, which was extremely beneficial for later on because I am functionally speaking now totally blind. So that was an extremely good thing that happened when I was younger. Rather than trying to teach me low vision skills, we just went automatically into Braille. Although I wasn't a happy camper about Braille, I did learn it, and I'm
When
very glad I did.
when
So.
would you say that the use of Braille became necessary for you in a big way
Yeah.
in
I
school?
yeah, 100%. I can talk about that a little bit later, but many ways I use Braille quite a lot in my career and during my schooling. Mainly I got my undergrad in music, and the only way to be a professional musician is to read music.
Makes sense.
So yeah, let me kind of so I was um going through K-12, I was really I kind of went through a mixture of homeschool and public school because I was extremely lucky that my mom was a teacher, and so she was able to homeschool me for part of the time. But then when I reached about the age of 16, I started a program called Middle College where I was able to attend college classes when I was still in high school. So we had about 2 hours of high school a day, and the rest were college classes. And if anybody has is 16 and they should definitely look into if their area has this kind of program. They call it like Head Start or a GECA or middle college or some, they have all kinds of different names for it depending on where you're at, but usually the community colleges will have some kind of program like this. It's super high. I super highly recommend it. So I did that for the last 2 years of high school. And then I continued on after that and got my AA in general music. Although if I probably would have waited one more year and taken another year of classes, I would have probably gotten another three AAs at that because I only needed like maybe one more class to get like another AA. And so it's definitely, and when I mean AA, I mean Associates of Arts degree. So I definitely recommend going to a community college if you have the option. Then I went to a CSU East Bay, which is a California State University, and got my undergrad in music with a focus in vocal performance. And so that's where I read Braille music all the time, all day, every day, lots and lots of Braille music. So that's probably the time in my life when I used Braille the heaviest. Then after that, I educationally, this is kind of where the education and professional a little bit diverge.
Mhm.
So educationally, I started my master's degree at OCAD University in inclusive design. So I waited a year and then started this program in 2017. Then um, in 20 uh, in 2021, so I graduated in 2019 with my master's in inclusive design, and then in 2021 I started my PhD in human-centered computing at Georgia Tech, and that's where I'm at right now. Professionally speaking, before I finished my undergrad, I went and started a company with my mom, which was called Sonia Biggs Educational Services, where we still provide uh, all the components of a visually impaired program to K-12 schools around the US. And so I did that basically until 2023 when I stepped back to become the treasurer on the board, and then also uh, uh, focused primarily on my work and my other the other work that I was doing. In 2019, I started working part-time at the Smith Kettlewell Eye Research Institute and also part-time at Sony Biggs Educational Services. And so this is right after I finished my master's degree. And then I worked part-time at both places until about 2023 when I really began my work at XR Navigation, which is where I'm at now. It's the company that I'm starting to commercialize the work that I was doing at Smith Kettlewell. So that's kind of a complicated story, not super clear timeline there. But
No,
it is, it's what it was.
I think it's important for our webinar participants and those who may be listening to this later on to understand people's journey to employment and how they got to where they are. Very few people wake up becoming the CEO.
Yes, that
Um,
that is definitely a unique experience that I have, and I really haven't ever gone through a job interview per se, which is really weird. So that is definitely a pro of being your own boss, I guess.
that's true. What has been a motivator for you to continue to work on making information accessible to people who are blind or low vision?
It's personal for me. I encounter inaccessible information every single day. I mean, for example, digital maps are my job and spatial diagrams are my job. And so I encounter those obviously every single day and they're completely blank. But even today, I encountered three documents that I needed to sign, and the signature fields were not I couldn't access them with my screen reader, or somebody wanted me to sign, using a PDF, and I was like, I can't do that very well, and so it was just it's very annoying to encounter situations like that in your professional life when, or even in your life in general, when
Mhm.
it should be usable, but it's not. And so that's what keeps me motivated. It's just every single day there's something, and I get inspired by that rather than discouraged, because otherwise I would be a very depressed mess.
Yeah, and it's a way of reaching out and helping your community by helping to make things accessible.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's my life goal to start a lab of the top blind uh, designers and developers, and really build technology to solve the biggest problems in the blindness community. So that's why I'm getting my PhD, and why I'm doing this work.
Mhm.
Um, so it's just it's personal. No, I'm not doing it for the greater good, although I am. But it's definitely personal.
Great. How do you stay current on industry material?
I read and attend industry conferences. So, like, for example, both Richard and I were at the CSUN Assistive Technology Conference, although we missed each other. So that's a good one for looking for assistive technology. You don't even need to attend to see all the interesting things that are going on there. They have the schedule of all the talks that are happening online, and so you can go through and read the abstracts, and that really gives you an idea of what's going on in the state of technology at this particular point in time. So that's a really good way. I'm on a bunch of email lists where, like the WebAIM email list, where I get information about what's happening in assistive technology. I don't read every single email, but I will read, like the subject lines of every single email that goes through there. And then I'm also on a bunch of email lists in the industry. So, I'm sure American Printing House of the Blind has a bunch of email lists, and so does Perkins School for the Blind. So, there's all these different types of lists that you can be on. So that's what I'm on as well. And then people just reach out to me and say, hey, here's some interesting thing that's happening with digital maps, or map text descriptions. Did you hear about this? which I very much appreciate because I don't have eyes everywhere and it helps when people send me that information. So that's basically how I keep up to date with what's going on in the world.
Great. So entrepreneurship has been a big part of your career journey. And what would you say keeps you reaching for those new projects and changing from one area of work to another?
Well, I mean, it's again, it goes back to being personal for me. And all my companies, both Sonia Biggs Educational Services and XR Navigation and my work at Smith Cadwell have all been around making the world more usable for blind people. And so that's definitely been one motivation. But the other motivation is that I'm always looking for things that are interesting to me. And so I guess the advantage of being a researcher is that you can really go after the interests that you have. You're not focused on one particular thing. And so that's really interesting, I guess. It's very it keeps you from being bored. And so that's definitely something that I keeps me going.
So
And also that I have, all these different things that I'm doing and can kind of flip between. Some people think that's chaotic. I find it keeps me interested in doing what I'm doing.
so it also gives you the ability to pick and choose the projects that you want to work on, as
Yeah, to some
opposed to
extent.
being told this is what you're going to work on because you're running
Exactly.
your own business. So you can be more selective as to what you take on.
Yeah, to some extent. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm. Great. So, what is something that you have learned at a prior job that has assisted you later on in your career journey?
At Sony Banks Educational Services, I did a lot of the systems acquisition there, and that is a lot more work than one might expect, especially if you're starting a company as a blind person. So, systems acquisition sounds super boring, but it actually is very important because you're looking for technology like payroll and benefits and bookkeeping and customer relationship management system and email and document, storage, all that kind of stuff. These are technologies that every business needs that are just like you have to go and buy those technologies as a business owner. And if you don't know which ones are accessible and usable, then you
Oh,
need to go and test them out, every single one of them. So what I've done is created a 3 question list of like 3 questions that I ask every single time, and these can definitely be expanded depending on the level of maturity that your organization is at. But I ask 3 questions. First is, do you have a single head of accessibility or point of contact that can fix my problems when they arise, or that can route them to the right person? And I need that single point of contact. It can't be, accessibility at blah.com, because if you have that general accessibility email, then it's not going to get to the right person, or you don't know when like that person's going to respond if there is even anybody at the other end of that email. So that's one. Two is, give me an accessibility conformance report. This is a systematic review of the software, and it tells you in a very clear snapshot of what is usable and what's not usable about that software. They don't need to be ashamed about it. Some people are, because they don't know how to program. But that's okay. Like, I need to know that before I go purchase the software. So I want that information. And an accessibility statement is not helpful. So if people have accessibility statements on their website and they send that to you instead, do not accept it. It's just something that GPT can pop up real quick. If and sorry, a large language model can pop up real quick. And then the third question is, can I have a live demo? So I need at least 2 of these to be correct, like answered yes, before I actually purchase software. And that was probably the biggest thing that I got from my first company.
okay. I really liked your description there because when you first threw the term out, I didn't know what you were talking about. Now it makes sense. Never knew it all had a terminology associated with it. Um, Okay, hold on one second. My computer is, okay.
The second question is
Mhm.
what is the sorry, give me an accessibility conformance report. And then the third question is give me a live demo that I can actually try with my own screen reader. And then the first question is who's the head of accessibility? So
Yeah.
those are the three questions. Doesn't need to be in order, just need answer to two of those.
But I love those. You've got it down to like, if you can't even get through this point, do we really want your payroll system? Do we really want
I
your
won't talk to
insurance
anybody unless they can
plan?
answer those questions.
Right.
I ask the salespeople these three questions, and if they can't answer them, then I just move on to the next one.
Hmm.
Not worth my time.
No, that totally makes sense. So great. I love that answer because it's so specific and it really gives people things to think about and another whole area of skill sets. Um, what technology do you use on a regular basis for your job?
Well, I'm using non-visual desktop access right now, Go NVDA.
Hmm.
So that's the one I use 14 hours a day. The rest of them, I mean, of course, I use VoiceOver on my phone, and then I actually make sure that I always have some kind of OCR tool, optical character recognition tool on my computer because oftentimes I'm given inaccessible documents, typically PDFs that
Hmm.
need to be OCR'd. And so I always make sure I have one of those on my computer. I have a very old version of Kurzweil 1000 that I still use, but there are many others that are just as good or better nowadays. So I don't recommend necessarily using Kurzweil 1000, but it works.
Right. There's other stuff now that's quote mainstream unquote that can also get the job done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 We
Great.
just invented optical character recognition for our community, so we've got the real old stuff.
Everybody else is taking advantage of it now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Brandon, this is Richard. I just want to interject. How much does artificial intelligence play into your work, if it does at all?
Well, I don't know how much artificial intelligence plays into optical character recognition, but definitely that. I use the advanced thinking version of Copilot in writing grants. So oftentimes I'll ask it to professionalize this paragraph or make it shorter, make it add correct grammar to it. Oftentimes I find, even as a blind person, as somebody who doesn't read a lot of text, I do get a lot of homophones mixed up, and you don't get those corrected in a lot of word processors these days. And so that is corrected oftentimes by large language models. So I definitely recommend it, and it makes me sound a little bit better. But you have to go through it and check to make sure it didn't.
Proofing
It
is, yeah,
yeah
yeah, absolutely.
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
But usually I find that if you say correct the English and grammar of the following paragraph, it doesn't
Mhm.
change too much.
Mhm.
So you're not going to get so much content change if you just do that.
Good, good.
Good question, Richard. Has personal or professional networking played a part in your career success? If so, how?
Just a little bit. I would say that, I mean, you can't do anything without networking. Uh, I met my co-founder for XR Navigation by sending a random email to him. I used his technology. He's Christopher Toth, and he built QRead and NVDA Remote and Chicken Nugget, if people remember that. A
Oh
bunch of
yeah.
other software that is built for blind people. And so I asked him if he knew anybody who was interested in working on non-visual digital maps, and he said me. So that's how we got in connected with each other. So that was a definite network piece. I met the Smith Kettlewell team at a conference, and so we were at the AER conference, national conference, and they just happened to be the only time I think, only time they've ever attended that conference, and I was there, and um, I ended up chatting with them and connecting with them afterwards, asking them how to use their stock software that they were building for my master's project. And when they had a job opening, they asked if I wanted to apply, and I said yes, absolutely. So that happened through
Connections are
networking.
great. They
I
certainly
also met my
are.
PhD advisor at several conferences as well. So we were actually attended like 4 or 5 before I actually applied to the PhD program.
Uh-huh. So was that something your now advisor kind of persuaded you into, or just kept pushing your interest a little further?
Well, I knew that if I wanted to study in the field of sonification, which is basically data visualization but using audio, there weren't very many PhD advisors who really focused on that in the world.
Mhm.
And my advisor is the most famous sonification expert in the world. His name's Bruce Walker, and he's published hundreds and hundreds of papers on sonification. And so if I wanted to study sonification, I was going to have to move somewhere because they don't do remote PhDs, unfortunately. My master's was remote, and that was incredible. But most PhDs are done in person still. And the ones that are, at really high quality universities. And so I said, you know what? Um, once I got accepted into there, I just applied because I just wanted to see if I get in because you don't know if you're going to get in or not.
Right.
And I ended up getting in, and I said, you know what? If I have to move somewhere for my PhD, it's gonna be to study with him because he's just he's the most well-known and most amazing sonification person in the world. So I definitely want to study with him, and I guess moving is worth it. So.
And I guess that's also an area where researching to know these things about somebody is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, it's a lot of researching to know these things. It's also just reaching out to people in that space and going back to networking. If you
Hmm.
ask, anybody's interested in doing, human computer interaction, I can tell you the researchers that are the ones you should apply with, if I learn about what your interests are. I didn't really have too many people who did that for me. I had a few for sure. And so I definitely applied to all those locations and so if you ask people who should I apply to study with, who are already experts in that area, they are going to tell you because it's a small world and we all know each other.
Hmm. Great. Given your current job, what are two skills that you consider critical for success?
Uh, Being able to write scholarship applications was one of the skills that I developed early on. I basically supported myself going through college with scholarship applications. So that became really useful later on when I needed to start writing grant applications, which are scholarship applications, just a lot bigger numbers on behind them.
That's a good way
So
to look at it.
yeah, very important skill. Yeah, you can I'm submitting a $2 million grant now, so
Good
yeah.
luck.
Yeah, thanks. So it's a very important skill set to develop. That's one of them for sure. And uh yeah, I would say that's definitely the most important. But I would, say something like, self-advocacy is also super, super important. Just, to be able to tell people what you need.
Hmm. Yep. Great. Is there a skill that you currently use in your current job that you did not know was going to be so important?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, I didn't realize when I was, I guess, growing up that, computers would be such a core part of who I am. And so my parents made me learn how to type when I was younger. That's been a core, key to who I am. I live on my computer. And so, the fact that I started so young was super, super important. I don't think I actually became independent on the computer until I was about 12. But I definitely recommend, starting earlier. I was fluent in typing when I was in, second or third grade, just because my parents made me do it and made me learn how to type really fast. at that young age. And so I didn't realize, growing up that that would be so important. And then, I mean, of course, scholarship writing, again, if we go back to that, that was also another skill I didn't think would be important, especially going into music.
So very often we see comments from teachers and sometimes from parents about, my child or my student uses this piece of assistive technology for either brailing the information into a computer or something along those lines, and they don't know how to touch type. Um, I totally agree with you, and I think touch typing is a critical skill. Um, would you also say that learning to use a, computer in addition to a tablet is important?
I say ditch the tablet. I'm not in the tablet realm at all.
Hmm.
Zero. I think I had a tablet for about 15 years of my life, and decided very early. Decided about 10 years ago that it just wasn't worth keeping a tablet around. Like I'm talking, like a Braille note taker, a Braille sense, or
Hmm.
something like
Hmm.
that. So the only reason why you would have one is with the new I would consider getting maybe, a graffiti, or it's not a graffiti, Monarch, where you can read Braille on multiple lines on a
Hmm.
Braille display, because that starts giving you the ability to have tactile diagrams.
Yes, it does.
I don't think the single line displays are very helpful in my opinion. There are some people who read Braille and that's how they think and they process information. They're tactile learners. I am not a tactile learner. I am an auditory learner. So that's how I learn. And so I think it's more the display that's important than actually the input method. But I think it's core critical for people to be able to use a computer competently, because that is going to be the lowest barrier and the most common entry to most digital professions.
Right. Since your company is making maps accessible to people who are blind or low vision, what are some skills that you see as important when transitioning from maybe using a digital map and then interacting with their environment? And of course, we understand like you're not an O&M person, but you have the knowledge base to understand the digital map and what are some areas that people might need help in, like have you observed anything in those areas? Um,
Yeah, well, speaking of O&M, orientation and mobility, orientation is super important. I think mobility gets the biggest focus,
mm,
but orientation is just as important. That's why
oh,
they're called
yes.
orientation and mobility instructors. They're not called mobility instructors. So they have that double name in there, and I think orientation is often left out of the conversation. In fact, when I told in this grant application that I'm submitting right now, a lot of the people, tried to think that our digital map tool was a mobility application, and it's absolutely not a mobility application. It
No,
is an orientation
orientation,
application.
right.
Yeah, so I think orientation is way underrated, and it's one of those things where if it's such an underutilized skill in our in the blindness community because in blind and low vision community because it's um like if you think about what are the orientation tools that are used right now, there's so few of them, unfortunately. I mean, it's like tactile maps and compasses, and there might be a few others out there, but very few tools are built for orientation, which is why I'm building this tool for orientation because there needs to be more. But if you're you think about, how the cognitive process works for navigating through space and mobility, moving through space, then orientation is the number one thing that you need in order to be able to know where to go. Like, are you taking a step to the right or forward or back or where do you need to go? It's orientation that can answer that question. And even if you're using something that does turn-by-turn directions for mobility, uh, we've shown in our research that people build zero spatial knowledge. Like they don't know anything about what's around them as they're navigating from point A to point B. And so if you're wanting to grab a, coffee on the way to a conference session and you're using a turn-by-turn navigation application, it's not possible for you to do that because you don't even know where the coffee place is. And so that's why you want an orientation tool to just tell you or to allow you to explore and understand where things are so that you know without the application telling you, that there I'm going to be passing a coffee place at this point in the journey.
Great. So I have lots of more questions on my list, but I did see some great questions popping into the chat. I'm first going to ask Alaya and Richard if they have any questions, and then we can move into the chat questions.
I think we can go to the chat. There's one or two in there, I think, Elia, and then
Yeah.
I'll follow up with a few after.
Yes, there is a couple of questions. There's one about, do you have a program for Braille music that you would recommend for a young student to learn?
There's really only one program for music on the computer that you need. I'm not sure what that question means. So to write music and to emboss music, you need the Lime Loud and Good Feel suite. There's only one out there. For learning music, there are the books by Richard Tesh. Which I think it's called How to Read Braille Music. And then you should also get the reference book for music as well, because when you're reading Braille music, you always find new symbols you had no idea existed. And so if you have, there's a reference book that you can get as well for Braille music, and I recommend both of those. Uh, yeah, that's it.
All right. And let me scroll down. I think that was really the only one that I see right
Oh
now.
no, there was the
Oh, no, no,
in the
why?
questions you
Oh.
asked about the three questions you asked.
Oh yeah, I answered that one
They
Yeah,
wanted
he-
to
in the
know number
session.
two. They wanted to know number two.
He
Yeah, yeah.
restated it.
I restated it as soon as they answered it, but it was get the head
Oh,
of accessibility, get the
oh, okay,
yeah, get the live demo and get the accessibility conformance report.
got it. Okay,
Right.
and something else just came in, Elia.
Let me
Oh, I
see.
took
Can
my
you please
focus off. I didn't see
repeat?
that.
The last thing I have is, can you please repeat the second one for the
How
three
about the
questions?
Q&A?
Oh,
Let's see.
I'm sorry. The Q&A, let's see. Oh, Q&A. Could you recommend some of the websites with the best accessibility?
Probably I mean, obviously the WebAIM websites are really, really good. And also, the W3C websites, because those are the ones who write the regulations. Our website's pretty good, I must say. So if you go to xrnavigation.io, not to toot my own horn, but that's fully WCAG. I think there's one thing that's keeping it from being AAA, but it's pretty close to being AAA compliant, which is way higher than the AA, which is the required legal standard that everybody should be meeting. So yeah. Those are the ones I'd recommend. Yeah. I also use my own personal website as a training tool, brandonkeithbiggs.com, and so that's also another one.
So, what does Brandon do for fun or for hobbies? I saw something about opera singing.
And
Yeah, so that was
chocolate.
actually that was my profession. Yeah, so I don't do too much opera singing anymore. Mostly, if I have fun times, I go to Italy a lot because my in-laws live there. And so I do a lot of traveling overseas. I did a study abroad program when I was getting my undergrad in Italy, and that's where I met my wife. So I do a lot of stuff around, Italy, Italian cooking, and Duolingo on learning Italian. So that's kind of I guess my primary hobby that I do. I
And what
also do a lot of urban hikes.
good. Yeah, that's great. And what do you see for the future of your business? Where do you hope to XR navigation to be in 5, 10 years?
Our vision is that every map is usable to, all maps are usable to everyone, and we're building the tool that other platforms can use to make that happen. So I would love if everybody on this call could right now email the accessibility email at Google, at Apple, at Microsoft and ask that their maps be usable, because that's the biggest thing we hear from people and places, is that nobody's asking that the digital maps and spatial diagrams are made accessible or usable, and so they don't do it.
Just because they don't hear the need from the community,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Were there any
great.
more questions, Eli? I don't think there are any more questions
No,
at the
I
moment.
didn't see any. Let me check. Let me double check the Q&A. Nope, there aren't any more in the Q&A, and there aren't any more in the chat right now.
Okay, so let's move back to
Yep,
other
keep going.
questions. So if you were to mentor someone interested in your career of accessibility, what are some soft skills that you see as essential for employment?
I mean, communication, of course, is always the biggest
Mhm.
one. Communication, lack of communication. I have a phrase that I say, lack of communication is pretty much the bane of all evil. So it's really important that you communicate, and it's something that I'm always trying to improve on. But even communicating what my work is, digital maps that everyone can use. That's been something that I've been working on ever since I began this in 2017. And it's taken me a long time to get, it's changed over the years. I think the first version was Audium, a virtual reality, visual, auditory, and text-based map viewer and editor. That was one iteration, and it's just, it's too much. It's not as effective at communicating, what it is. And so we've iterated on that. Another skill is being able to problem solve. So I mean, when you're handed anything really, when it comes through email and it's not accessible, what do? You need to have multiple approaches to solve that problem. And this really happens in any work related situation. And so you always want to have, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. And as somebody who, was a chief financial officer, we had to always have those, plan A through plan D in order to make sure that everything was always running. And so I keep that as a philosophy for my life. I always have multiple plans, and sometimes they all fail. And sometimes you don't think that one's gonna, you're gonna need, plan D, but sometimes you do. So I always try to keep, have multiple solutions for one problem.
Great. So, what is something that you are proud of regarding your career?
Well, I'm in guiding the team that made the first digital map viewer everyone can use, the digital map that everyone can use. So we've got, I mean, that's obviously going to be my biggest
Mhm.
proudest achievement. We built the first web content accessibility guidelines compliant digital map uh, ever, and so that's kind of a big deal, I think.
Yes.
We've shown that it can be done. There's absolutely no excuse for people not to have a usable digital map. Like I've spoken at from the ADA centers who kind of give guidance to state and local governments about this. I've presented at CSUN, the CSUN Assistive Technology Conference on how to make digital maps usable. I've got blog posts on my website. There's all kinds of materials on how to make accessible digital maps. And, Audium's not the only option. You can also make detailed text descriptions as well. And I've got guides on how to do that on my website. But, it's possible. In fact, we need to change the European Accessibility Act because it has an explicit exception in there for digital maps. They don't need to be
Oh,
usable, which is just ridiculous. So they just
that's
didn't think it
backwards.
was possible when they crafted the law. So we need to change this perception that digital maps are inherently too difficult to make accessible and usable for everyone.
I see some more trips to Italy and abroad.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, do you want to tell our audience a little more about digital maps and maybe some examples of where they might, what kind of environment they might uh, be usable in and things like that?
Digital maps are everywhere. Able-bodied people view 300 digital maps a year. Contrast that with blind people who view less than one. This is a massive gap that we are trying to fill. And digital maps are anywhere from on Google Maps, Apple Maps. They're the aspect of the app. It's not the turn-by-turn directions. It's the actual graphic that's on there that shows all the different objects on the map, the roads, the buildings, the doorways, the sidewalks. If you're booking a rideshare app, it's the blank element on the screen where it shows where that driver is on like in the world and where you are, and so you can figure out how to get to them if they don't show up where you expect them to be. It's the graphic that's completely blank when you go and book an airplane ticket and or a stadium ticket and you need to select your seat. They're
Oh, didn't
you know,
even think of that one.
sighted people are able to look on there and say, hey, this is behind a pillar, or this is in a really bad location in the stadium. We need to, like, I want to move forward because I like to be closer to the action, or I'm going to be with a sighted person who's going to be, want to be closer to the action. And or I like to be closer to the vending area, and this seat is closer to the vending area. You can't get any of that information without a map. Same thing for if you're planning seats, a seating arrangement at a wedding. I don't know if anybody ever has a wedding, but that is a really important task that you need to be able to do, or even planning the event layout of, where the tables are going to be,
Mhm.
and where you're going to place the flowers and all that kind of stuff. All that is used through maps, and there are numerous professions that require the use of maps. I'm talking about indoor maps right now because that's the grant that I'm writing. So that's on top of my mind. But you've got architecture, and going out of indoor, you've got epidemiology, meteorology, oceanography, geology, and there's over 1,000 professions that rely on geographic maps and spatial diagrams. And we didn't even get into an anatomy or circuit boards or engineering diagrams. These are all super critical, and where space is the super critical element, and that's the kind of information that Audium presents.
That's amazing. I just, I have to tell you, preparing for your presentation tonight, I gave it, I thought, some thought about when digital maps might be used, but you really made me think hard when you mentioned the stadium and things and, floor plans and things like that. But those are whole other segments that never crossed my mind.
That's because you're blind.
But it is,
And
it's true.
blind people don't think of these things
I
because
don't
it's
think
not
about those
usable.
things. I used to work in a job where we had an overlay that would load on our computers. It would load over Google Maps so that we could see what parish boundaries somebody's residence was within. And I always had to have other people do that part of the job for me because there was no way to make those Google Maps accessible or the overlay that went with it.
Well, that's
Um,
very easy for Audium to do, so it wouldn't be very hard at all to make that usable now.
that's amazing. Yeah, we had 118 parishes and between two counties, and wow, that would have been really cool. So great. Do we have any more questions, Elia? I don't want to steal
I don't believe we do.
audience questions. Okay.
No, I don't see any in the
Oh.
chat or in the Q&A.
Okay, so feel free. We have a few more minutes here. I have a few more questions to go. What would you say, Brandon, is something that you have learned throughout your career that has helped you succeed in all of your work? What are some skills that maybe you feel like you've developed over your career journey?
I think it's really the ability to communicate what I need in life, and not being shy about being blind, because it is something that you will encounter all the time, and being very upfront with people that, hey, I'm blind. You might be getting some formatting issues when you get my documents because I can't tell when the format changes very easily, or if you ask me to sign a document, print out and sign a document, it's not something I'm very good at doing. And so I very much prefer not to do that. And I can sign in these other ways. These are all things that, you should be very upfront about, like, oh, hey, that's not accessible. Or it's very difficult for me to do. So that's something that I've definitely had to develop over time. Um, yeah, I would say that's a really important skill that people need to learn. And same thing goes for courses and taking university courses. You need to tell that professor that you're blind and that you need and what you need, what accommodations you need, and then be on top of making sure those materials get to the uh, alternate media coordinator at your university's alternate department. And if you need alternate media and you don't have an alternate media coordinator, then you need to tell that university they need to get their stuff together, because that is a very important role that I realized one of the universities I'm attended did not have. So it took made a statistics course that I took, instead of being maybe a semester long, it took 3 years, because we didn't have an alternate media coordinator. It was one of the major problems. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, I could agree. Statistics at the college level is can get interesting. Oh boy. Yeah. Um, Great. So, what would you say inspired you to work on a lot of the com the your PhD work with the human, I don't want to mess the title up. What is it? Human
Human-centered computing.
centric computing. Is there something specific related, maybe in a situation or something that really pushed you towards that area? Maybe you could tell us a little more about that.
I would say it really started with um, me seeing in Sony Big's educational services that there were so many children going through K-12 schools who were just getting assignments created for them. And, some of these textbooks cost like $30,000 to create, and they were just used for that one student. And that was super frustrating for me because, a blind student can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to put through school. And a lot of that cost is related to the content in the classroom not being usable. And you would think that, schools would have the best, most inclusive content around, but no, they don't.
Far from it.
And it's ridiculous. And when like I went to a school board meeting where they were voting on the like the reading curricula that they were going to
Hmm.
be using, and no one mentioned accessibility and usability as one of the metrics that they were evaluating on, even though it would cost hundreds, thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to make that usable to a blind student. It was
Hmm.
not part of their equation. And in K-12 schools, a lot of the special education funds come out of the general budget. And so it's like a very big oversight for these school boards to not be considering inclusive design as one of the metrics that they're looking at when evaluating educational content. And the law requires it, but they don't necessarily do it. They spend the money accommodating after the fact, which is super expensive. In the accessibility space, we call it the muffin or the cookie effect, where
Hmm.
you add the chocolate chips after the cookie's already been baked. And it's really difficult to do that, but it's pretty easy to add the chocolate chips before the cookie's been baked. So that's what we should be doing.
Right.
That's what really
I
inspired me to get going and get an inclusive design master's degree. And then after that, I realized that research was actually a profession that I could do.
Mhm.
And in order to get grants, I needed to have a PhD to be the principal investigator and to be successful at that. And so that's why I'm getting my PhD.
Great. So it's interesting, while we were just talking, I was thinking about a lot of times I see requests from teachers or professionals in the field that they have a student who's working on an app that, might be like matching exercises for, like, okay, move the blue square to the word blue, or, something like that. And, those are the types of exact things that you're talking about, like the lack of accessibility that is not thought about when it comes to developing educational materials.
We need to be careful with using the word accessibility in this day and age. I call it usability because
Yeah,
it's
that's a
useless.
good word.
They're useless.
Yeah,
Like, well,
yeah,
let's just paint it what it is. It's not accessibility, it's usability.
yeah. Lack of
If you can't
usability.
use
Yeah,
the app, why would you buy it?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's true. True. Okay. Any last minute questions? Don't be shy, audience.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up. And
And
Brandon,
Brandon, I do want to ask you, do you have any closing thoughts before we start wrapping up?
Well, I guess kind of, going back to my journey and, what's kind of been the most successful thing for me, it's that ability when I started my schooling, my higher education journey when I was 16, doing at a community college, I was able to take all the courses from every single different discipline that I could possibly imagine. And so, I took anything from biology courses to astronomy courses to business courses to dance to, physical fitness. I took all these different courses, and I really highly recommend that people do something similar to that so they can learn what interests them. And uh, there's a lot of research that shows if people specialize too early in life, they become a lot less happy with their profession later on. And when you're young and able to go through community college and stuff like that, you can really do it at any time in your life, but it's much easier when you're younger, because that's what is expected of you at that time in your life. It's very nice just, even if you need to take a couple extra years, take as many courses as you can at a community college or something like that where it's super inexpensive and just try every course out that you could possibly imagine wanting to ever take, and maybe some that you didn't even think would be fun. Like I took biology. I'm very happy I did, but I definitely did not want to take it. So that's anyway. I think it's very useful now because we're doing dissection diagrams and anatomical diagrams and stuff like that, and I can kind of competently understand what's being said in there. So things come in handy later on in life that you never thought would be useful. Statistics I thought was the worst course I took in community college. But I ended up having to take it again in my PhD because I completely forgot everything from my community college. And so I've taken statistics twice. I am very masochistic, I guess. But like you never know what's going to be super useful. And so I just recommend taking as many courses as you can.
It's interesting. I got into Hunter for my master's in social work and chose not to go there for two reasons. And one of them was that they were going to make me take another statistics class.
and
So
Brandon, other than xrnavigation.io, if folks want to connect with you, are you professionally available on LinkedIn?
Absolutely, yeah. Search for me, Brandon Biggs on LinkedIn. I am the one with a very long title. It says CEO of XR Navigation, PhD candidate at Georgia Institute of Technology, engineer at Smith Catawba Eye Research Institute. I don't remember what else it says, but it's very long like that. So if you find somebody Brandon Biggs like that, you can click on me, and it'll describe about the journey that we talked about here.
This has been a great presentation, Brandon. And Lori, thanks for the wonderful interview as always. We appreciate our audience.